All right, so good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And if you joined us last week, we started off two really exciting things. We did our first ever program with Dr. David Suzuki, one of Canada's icons of conservation and science. If you didn't check that out, check it out on our YouTube channel now. It is, like all our programs, going to remain up forever. And we also began our epic partnership with Parks Canada, where over the next month, we are going to be doing amazing journeys coast to coast to coast in English and French, highlighting some of Canada's most iconic and beautiful places. Today, we are joined by one of my favorite past speakers on this broadcast, Monica Granados, and she is with Environment and Climate Change Canada, one of our longest standing partners here as an organization. And today, she is going to dive in with us on becoming a junior scientist. If your classes have joined us before, whether on live or on YouTube, you will know that we bring in amazing scientists and explorers from around the globe to share their stories. But what we want that to do is to inspire you guys to become junior scientists of your own. And no one dives in on that topic in more detail than Monica. So I'm really excited to bring her in. We're going to share a little bit of a story with you guys today. It's a little bit different than our usual broadcast, but I hope you love it as much as I do. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Monica, and take us away.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much for having me again, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and Jesse. So welcome, everybody. I hope you're all ready to go on a science adventure today. I'm going to tell you a story about Celia. Celia is about the same age as you, and she loves science. This story is about a discovery that she makes and how she learns to share her discovery like scientists share their discoveries. So your teacher asked you to have a piece of paper with you that will be your junior scientist notebook. So if you don't have a piece of paper ready, go ahead and grab one of those if you can. If not, just keep it in your head because we're going to have a couple of different questions that are going to come up during the presentation. So I have my junior scientist notebook ready. I'm going to be writing down the answers to the questions that are posed during the presentation. And I hope that you'll do the same. So I'm going to go ahead and now share my screen so that you folks can see the story I'm about to tell. Okay, so this story is called Becoming Junior Scientist. It's a story written by myself, Dr. Granados, Mathieu Morin, and it's illustrated by Dominique Lin. So you're going to see some really cool illustrations that were created by her. So I told you the story is about Celia, and this is her. It's the day before her birthday, and she loves to go fishing with her mom at a stream by her house. The stream is a beautiful blue, and the clouds in the sky look like marshmallows. She's sitting on a log when she feels a tug on her fishing line. Now, if you've ever been fishing, you know that a tug means something might have bitten your fishing line. Oh my God, she's caught a fish she's never seen before. So we're going to get started with our junior scientist notebook. And I want you to either write down in a couple of words, maybe one or two, or maybe even draw your answer to this question. What do you do when you find something cool? So I'm going to give you a minute to write down your answer to the question, what do you do when you find something cool? So take your time. You could do a couple of words. You could do just a drawing. Or if you don't have a piece of paper, just keep it in your mind.
While you guys are doing that too, I want to note we've got a whole bunch of groups joining on YouTube as well. So if you guys want to type in the chat bar and let us know what you do when you do something cool for our live classes, if you want to type in the chat bar in StreamYard, any way you want to share what you do, let us know. We'll relay it to Monica. We'd love to keep the story going and get you guys really engaged today. All right. Take your time. We still got a minute, everybody. Let me know in the chat bars.
Okay, start wrapping up your answers or your drawings. Can't wait to hear what you do when you find something cool. Okay, let's get back to the story. Celia takes the fish that she caught home and she puts it in a fishbowl with nice, clean water to study. Celia documents the fish in many different ways. She takes pictures of the fish and takes notes on its body shape because the shape of a fish's body tells her about how fast the fish can move. She also measures the length of the fish because it tells her how old the fish could be. She also looks at where is the mouth placed on the fish. Is it on the bottom? Is it on the top? Is it somewhere in the middle? Because where a fish's mouth tells you a lot about what it likes to eat. She then takes all her notes and decorates her bedroom wall with her findings. At the end of the day, Celia goes back to the stream and returns the fish back to where she found it. You see, fish are adapted to live in the environment that you found them. So it's best that they live in their natural habitat. It's now the next day, and this means it's Celia's birthday. Happy birthday, Celia! All her friends from school come over to her birthday party. She tells them about her discovery. She tells them what color the fish is, how long it is, what its body shape is, the placement of its mouth. And all her friends absolutely love the fish, and they want to find the fish themselves. So they start looking everywhere for the fish, under rocks, in drawers, far, far away. How about you? Where would you look for a fish? So if you found out someone found a really neat new fish and you wanted to find where it was, where would you look for a fish? And that's the second question for your junior scientist notebook. So just like last time, I'm going to give you a minute to write down what are your thoughts about where you would look for a fish. You could write it down in a couple words, you could draw it, or just think about it at your desk.
While you guys are up to that, again, I want to stress we've got another class that joined us live, a few more on YouTube. You guys can share in the chat bars. And Monica, after our first question, the overwhelming answer, which we can get to in more detail later on in the broadcast, is that everyone wants to show their friends. If they find something cool, they're going straight to their friends and family to highlight their discovery, which I think is a really awesome thing.
That's neat. That's exactly what Celia does.
Awesome. All right. Keep those writing fingers, guys. I see so many kids writing. You guys are awesome in keeping up with this. Way to go with all your notebooks.
Okay, just a little bit more time to write down your answer to where would you look for a fish. Okay, wrap up your answers. And we're going to head back to the story. Celia goes and tries to explain to them where to find this new fish. She realizes that people want to know more about the fish and where to find it. She realizes, probably like most of you folks have, that she needs to share her knowledge so that people could find the fish. But if she goes around and talks to each individual friend, that's going to take a lot of time. And that's really hard to tell absolutely everyone in the world. That will take hours and hours and days and years. So she goes and talks to her mom about her problem. She says, "Mom, it's really hard to tell everybody about my discovery. No one knows where to look for the fish. They're looking under rocks. Her mom thinks about Celia's problem and suggests that she go and meet with a fish expert who is a scientist. This is Dr. Seja. She is an ichthyologist, or somebody who studies fish. She's wearing a blue dress and has a pin of a fish above her pocket. She really loves fish. Celia gets to meet Dr. Seja at her laboratory. The laboratory is really cool. It has pictures of fish everywhere and fish in tanks. When she gets to the laboratory, Celia sits down with Dr. Seja and shows Dr. Seja her notes containing her pictures, notes, drawings on all of that information that she took down of the fish. Celia asks Dr. Seja, hey, how do scientists share their discoveries? Dr. Seja explains that scientists write about their discoveries in reports called scientific papers. Once they've written this paper, they send them to scientific journals that are issued regularly, kind of like newspapers or magazines, or your favorite show that comes on once a week. Then, this information that is in these journals is useful to a lot of people, like lawmakers, doctors, and other scientists. That information that scientists write in these journals can also make its way to the textbook that you yourself use in class. Celia is intrigued. She asks, can everyone read these scientific papers? Dr. Seja answers that some of these scientific journals are free to read, so that everyone can read them, but others, unfortunately, you have to pay money for. Celia thinks that everyone should be able to read about her fish for free. Dr. Seja explains to Celia that she understands her feelings and that they're trying to make science more accessible so that everyone can read and learn from their work for free. Lots of people are working to help make it easier for scientists to share their knowledge. This is called open science. Scientists also give talks, like today, to make it easier to share their discoveries to everyone, using words that everyone can understand. So, let's turn back to our junior scientist notebook. What's one way that you can make something easier to find or understand? In the story, Dr. Seja gives a talk about her work using words that are easy to understand and using cool pictures. So, if you were trying to make something easier to find or understand, what would you do? So pull out that junior scientist notebook, and I'll give you a minute again to answer the question, what's one way you can make something easier to find or understand?
I have been loving the answers on the YouTube chat and live. Miss Reyes's class has been particularly awesome in our StreamYard chat. And I want to say for you, Monica, we've got groups joining in from California, Alberta, India, and Ontario on the YouTube chat. So it's people from all over the world. Really, really exciting to have some familiar faces in there and some new folks too. So fantastic, guys.
So great. Thanks, Jesse, for letting me know. Okay, we've got about 10 more seconds to finish your thoughts on what's one way you can make something easier to find or understand. Write up your answer or your drawing. And let's get back to the story to find out what Celia does to make something easier to find or understand. Celia is inspired by Dr. Seja. She wants to give a talk like scientists do. So she talks to her teacher, and Celia gives a talk to her class about the fish and where it lives. That way, they all can know where to find it. Celia gets a big round of applause from her class. They also love this fish. Celia's teacher helps her record the presentation that she gives to her class and uploads it on YouTube so that others can learn about her discovery. It gets lots of views and likes and a lot of new people who love this fish. Back in the laboratory, Dr. Seja is studying the fish that Celia has found. She looks through books and scientific papers and can't find anything like it anywhere in the world. This fish seems new. Maybe it's a new fish that's never been described before, what we call then a new species. Dr. Seja talks to other scientists and determines that it actually is a brand new species of fish that's never been found before. So Dr. Seja, being a scientist, she writes a scientific paper about Celia's discovery of this new fish. Because both Dr. Seja and Celia worked on this discovery together, both their names appear on the paper. They make it open access so that it is free to read and everyone can learn about this fish. It turns out that everyone loves to read about this new fish. It's so popular that it becomes the new mascot of Celia's school. They put it on t-shirts and on buttons and on posters, and everyone loves Celia's new discovery. The end.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Monica, for such a beautiful story. And I want to stress, too, I know you shared the YouTube link before the broadcast with Dominique. So for all our classes, if you guys love those illustrations, Dominique Lynn was the amazing illustrator behind them. If you are joining us live or after the fact, Dominique, thank you so much for that. What a beautiful, beautiful story you helped bring to life in such a nice way. And so, yeah, guys, we are going to dive in with questions and comments and all sorts of things today. Again, it's a little bit of a different broadcast for us, but it's so exciting to get to share such a neat story with so many kids from around the world. Another class just highlighted that they're joining us on YouTube. So welcome in from across the globe to over, I think, 10 classrooms of 250 plus kids. What a really fun start to the morning. So guys, what we'll do is we'll go through the classes. We'll dive in on what you guys answered. You guys had these notebooks today. You shared your stories. You answered some of these questions that Monica posed to you. So if you guys want to highlight some of the things that you guys answered as a classroom, if you want to ask questions of Monica, of sort of the scientific process, we'll dive in with that. Wherever your curiosity takes you, I look very forward to your questions. So we're going to start with our class joining us in Windsor, Nova Scotia, Miss Boyd's class, grade 4-5. If you guys want to kick us off with some of your answers and some of your questions, just unmute your microphone and come on up. Hi, guys. How are you guys doing today? Excellent. Me too. So does anyone have anything that they want to share? We shared these questions today. Does anyone want to highlight what they do when they discover something cool, or how would you go about sharing a story if you learned it for the first time? I'd love to hear some of your answers.
Jada? If I discover something cool, I usually show my parents.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'm a grown-up, and every time I do something cool, I still call my parents and tell them about it.
So one of my favorite stories in all of science is based on this. So there's a scientist named Claire Patterson. He was a lot of people don't know his name. He was the first person to discover the age of the Earth through some really cool scientific processes not too long ago, and I think either the late 50s or early 60s. And the first thing he did when he discovered the actual age of the Earth for the first time in human history is he drove like a couple hundred kilometers to go see his mother and tell her first. So the first person to know outside of him as a scientist was his mom. So great answer, guys. Miss Crouch's class. So Miss Crouch's class is joining us today in Smithville, Missouri. If you guys want to unmute your mic and come on in, let us know some of your thoughts for any of the things we shared today. Hi, guys.
Have you ever discovered a new fish?
Have I ever discovered a new fish? So I personally have not discovered a new fish. I've caught so many different types of fish. I've caught teeny tiny fish, like little baby fish, what we call fry, all the way to meter long nose gar. So I've caught many different types of fish that probably live around Missouri as well, because I'm located in Ottawa, but we share a lot of similar fish species. I do have some colleagues, though, that have discovered new fish species. So there are a colleague from the University of Michigan goes down to the Amazon, where they haven't done a lot of exploration of the different fish there. So they go on these trips and they catch a bunch of fish, and in that process, they find a lot of new species of fish. So he has had the opportunity to name a bunch of new species of fish.
Yeah, very, very cool. I'm so glad we got that question, and I'm so glad your story touched upon finding species, because one of the things we like to highlight here is that there's so much more to discover. You know, if you go down to somewhere like the Amazon, if you go to the deep sea, there are still ecosystems on Earth that are so little explored, so little discovered, that you can almost always find something new that's never been seen or documented before in scientific history. And I think that's a really magical thing to be a naturalist, to be able to find something that no one has ever really charted in a serious way before. So cool question, guys. Miss Reyes is second graders. You guys are like at the ready. I love how enthusiastic you are. If you want to unmute your microphone and come on in, share away. Hi, guys.
And tell me your question.
Take my time. How did you become a scientist?
And your question.
What kind of scientist are you?
Oh, great questions. Okay, so I'll start with how I became a scientist. So I've always been super interested in the natural world. When I was a kid, I grew up in New Jersey, in Moonachie, New Jersey, and there was a really cool forest right in front of my house. And after school, I would spend a lot of time in that forest, looking in the rocks, looking inside the bark of trees, and always finding something new that was new to me. And I love that idea. I love the fact that I could go outside and make new discoveries and ask questions about how the world worked, and then trying to find answers. And so that inspired me to go to school to become a scientist. So I did 4 years of college, an undergraduate degree, where I specialized in ecology. So learning about the natural world and how different organisms and like creatures interact. And then I did a PhD. So I did another 5 years of school, learning about specifically like how different creatures are connected in terms of like what eats what in an ecosystem, and doing different cool experiments and going and scuba diving. And at the end of my PhD, I then started to work for Environment and Climate Change Canada, where I do some science, but also work specifically on open science. So during my my education, I did work with fish and with mussels and with crayfish, and sometimes with like teeny tiny microorganisms. So I am trained as a freshwater biologist. So I study things that live in fresh water. That's the kind of scientist that I am.
Yeah, great two-part question, Ms. Students. And I love highlighting the story of what it takes to become a scientist. And I think that for some students, it's really when I was much younger, it was really daunting to think, wow, you're in grade 5 now, you make it all the way to grade 12, and then there's 4 years, and then there's 4 years or 5 years past that, and it's sort of overwhelming to think about. But when you end that sort of thing, you end up really quite young and now having the skills and opportunity to do something that is really fulfilling and exciting for the rest of your life. So it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to become a scientist, and it is a lot of work to get there to become someone like Dr. Granados. But if you do, you can end up in a position where you get to share stories and highlight amazing things to people all around the world, like we have a chance to do today. So I think that's a really cool message. So thank you so much, Monica. Miss Gagne's class, let's head to Algonquin, Illinois. If you guys have a question for us or comment, come on in and unmute. And then Miss O'Connor, I'm coming to you right after. Hi, guys. Hi, Miss Gagne's class. Hi.
So if you had a name, if you found a fish and it's like it wasn't like ever found before, what would you name it?
Oh, that's such a cool question. So yeah, so usually when scientists find a new fish, they don't name it after themselves. Sometimes they name it after like the place where they found it. Sometimes they name it after like another famous scientist that might have inspired them to go into science. I would name it after my mom, because she's really great. Other people have done, like, I know that there's like a spider that's named after Beyonce. So that's another really cool thing about getting to find a new species, is that you can name it after anything you think is pretty cool. Or maybe Lego. I love Lego. Maybe I would name it after Lego.
Yeah, like the Star Wars Lego Death Star. That's the best philosophy. Cool question, guys. I don't think we've ever gotten that before. That's right. Let's go to Miss O'Connor's class. So Miss O'Connor's class is joining us today in sweet old New Jersey, where you mentioned you grew up not too far from there. So that's pretty exciting.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Go for it.
Hi, Monica. My student who's virtual, he can't be seen right now, so unfortunately it's too complicated for Mrs. O'Connor, but he wonders, what's the rarest fish you ever caught? That's from my Vikram, who's home learning.
Awesome. Vikram, that's such a great question. What's the rarest species I've ever caught? So probably the red-side dace. So I was working with some friends who studied specifically the red-side dace, and the red-side dace lives in Ontario, Canada, specifically a lot of areas near Toronto. And Toronto is a really big city that has a lot of buildings and roads. And so it's a pretty, it's a species that is not very common. So I think it's actually officially an endangered species. So meaning that it's risk of being extinct or no longer being found. And so that was probably the rarest species I've ever found, but there's a lot of cool work that is going on to understand how we can protect the habitat of the red-side dace so that it doesn't become even more rare and that more people can find it.
Yeah. Very, very cool answer. I love that. And I brought it up on the screen if you want to check out that fish as well. So check out the red-side dace when you're done. We're going to take a few quick questions from YouTube, and then we're going to do another round with all you live classes. We are whipping through these. This is great. So lots of opportunity to share your questions and queries. A few from YouTube. So Hunter in Miss Matsuba's class in Spruce Grove, Alberta wants to know if the fish in the story was a real fish.
No, it's an imaginary fish. So it's kind of based, it's really from the imagination of Dominique. But it's kind of based on a goldfish, which is a real fish. So, but it's not a native fish to Ontario or even North America. So I think it's based on a goldfish, which does have some relatives that do exist here in Ontario. So it's closely related to a carp. So if you found a fish, you wouldn't want to put your goldfish back into the water, because that is a non-native fish. But if it's a fish that you found in the water, that one's okay to put back into its natural habitat.
I think that's a really important message, so thank you for sharing that. Ms. Esquivel joining us in Santa Ana, California, where I think we all wish we were right now. What a lovely spot in the world. They answered one of your questions earlier about how to convey the message better. They talked about changing words and making it simpler for others to understand. Now, you do this really, really well. It's not something that a lot of scientists are trained to do. So why is it important to share your story in a way that people can understand? Why is that so integral to communicating science?
Yeah, I think that's because, usually when scientists write papers in these scientific journals that I talked about, they're writing it for other scientists. And when we do science, we're not necessarily doing it for other scientists. We want to do it for other people and for other humans and for other kids and for our mom and our dad and our uncles. And in order for them to understand the work that you are doing, they maybe not necessarily went through the same training that scientists do. And so in order to understand the discovery that you made, you have to put it into language that is more accessible so that they can share in that discovery with you and they can understand the impact of your discovery as well. So the using language that's accessible or just easier to understand, using images is really cool. So I like to use images when I talk about the research that I do. It means that science can be shared with everyone. And I truly believe that science and the knowledge that we produce as scientists or even as junior scientists belongs to everyone. And we need to make it accessible for everyone.
Fantastic. We'll get to that in a little bit. I want to make sure we get a chance to talk open access before we dive in the broadcast at the end. But for now, what we'll do is dive back in with our live classes, give you guys a chance to come up one more time. So our class in Nova Scotia, Miss Boyd's group, come on up, unmute that mic, and take us away. Hi, guys.
Hi, Yen.
Hi. All right, who has a question? Audrey, do you want to come up? Make sure you talk nice and loud, okay, honey? Over here.
How many years did it take for you to become a scientist?
How many years did it take for me to become a scientist? Okay, so it took me to get a PhD. It took me about, so I also did what's called a master's degree. So it took me about, let's see, I did 4 years of college and then another 2 years of a master's, so that's 6. And then I did like another 5 years of for a PhD, so about 11 years. But the important distinction here is that I did formal training to become a scientist. So that's why I'm Dr. Granados. But you don't have to be a PhD to do science or to be a junior scientist. I would say that when I was a kid and I was looking under rocks and asking questions about the things that I was finding, I was already a scientist. So that means that when you go out and you find something cool under a rock or in a pond, or when you're going fishing, or when you're going swimming, or maybe you're up at the cottage, and you tell other people about that cool thing you found, you're already a scientist and you're already on your way to becoming a scientist. So make sure that you don't think that you have to go through this formal training. It's one way to become a PhD, so having that, what we call an honorific or the doctor title, but you can be a scientist tomorrow. And I bet Jesse has bunch of ideas of how you can do that.
I do, and we're going to save a lot of it at the end of the class. I'll give you guys a sneak peek. Some of your classes might know about our Backyard Bio program coming in May, which is pretty exciting. And then Environment and Climate Change Canada also has their amazing Climate Kids program, which we'll again highlight at the end. But thank you for that early call to action, Monica. Miss Crouch's class, let's head back to Missouri. If you guys have another question or comment, come on in. Hi, guys.
Hi, folks.
How did you decide what type of scientist you wanted to be, and what was your favorite part?
Oh yeah, cool question. So when like when you go to college or university, you usually take a bunch of different classes in science, and so like you take chemistry and physics, biology, and then I got interested in ecology. So what's neat is that when you go to university, if you're going to go down that path, is that you're going to get exposed to a bunch of different types of sciences. And I ended up really liking ecology because I love that it was all about the natural world outside. And so I had this cool experience where I went up to Algonquin Park for a summer, and it was my job to do some experiments on Lake Opeongo. And I thought, this is so cool. I get to do science outside instead of like in a laboratory or on a bench. You know, sometimes you still have to do some of that work, but the majority of the experiments and questions that I got to ask was about the world outside. And so that is why I gravitated towards freshwater biology and ecology, because I got to spend a bunch of time outside.
Yeah, I know a lot of our classes are across North America today and may never get the chance to visit in person, but I've had the pleasure of going to Lake Obiango in Algonquin Park. It is stunning. Algonquin Park is one of the gems of Canada. I encourage everyone to look this up when they're done. It's just a really, really beautiful slice of heaven here in Ontario. So I'm so glad we got a chance to reference what a neat place. Miss Reyes' class, come on back up. I love the enthusiasm of all our classes today, Monica. So I get to see all the classes in the background, and like all the kids are up at the camera. We have more questions to possibly answer. This is great. So Miss Reyes group, come on up again and share.
Okay, wave everybody, say hi.
Hi.
Okay, put your mask down. You can ask your question.
What kind of experiments do you do?
Oh, what kind of experiments do I do? So I'm not don't get to do too many experiments now because I get to work more on what we call policy. So like my job is to try to make science more open and easier to share. But when I was doing experiments, I did some really neat ones. So I'll tell you about two. One was about how to catch, we wanted to know how many different types of fish were in the Detroit and St. Clair River, because that was going to give us some information about whether or not the river was healthy or not. So how do you go and catch fish in a huge river? Well, you use something called boat electrofishing. So you use a very special boat that can run a little bit of electricity into the water. And what that does is that it attracts fish to come towards the boat. And when they get close enough, they get a little bit woozy. And we use these big nets to scoop them up from the top of the water, and we put them into a aquarium on the boat so that they can breathe and they can stay healthy. And we do kind of what Celia did. Which was we look at the length of it, we try to identify the species, we take a bunch of information, including pictures, and then once the fish has been processed, where we got all that information, we put it back into the river. So that is a cool thing that I've done experiment-wise. I also got to work in the Magdalen Islands. So it's a series of islands that are off the coast of Prince Edward Island here in Canada. And we did these neat experiments that are called mesocosms. So we were trying to simulate an environment, and we put them inside inside one of the lagoons in the islands, and we would go in and we take huge syringes that we made, and we would sample water out of these big, huge containers, and we were trying to see what happens to the number and different types of little microorganisms that were inside these huge containers. And some of them had muscles and some of them didn't have muscles, but it was really cool because we got to do some snorkeling and scuba diving to do those experiments. So it was like our lab was totally underwater the whole time.
Super, super cool. And this is what I was talking about earlier, but it's just the neatest thing to get to be a scientist. You get to explore, you get to go to amazing places, collaborate with people all around the world. So for any of our kids today that are thinking about being a scientist, start by being a junior scientist. Follow some of the lessons we learned today in Monica's story. And then down the road, you're really keen, keep up with those studies, learn a lot, and maybe you can end up with a really, really cool career like Dr. Granados. Let's take 3 more questions together, and then we'll wrap up the broadcast. Miss Gagne's class, Miss O'Connor, and then I'll take one from YouTube to wrap us up. So Miss Gagne, come on in, unmute that mic, and go for it. Hi, guys.
Hey, folks.
Oh, you got to unmute first on the computer. There we go.
Hi, so my question is, if you breed a crossbreed with another crossbreed, would that be considered a quadruple, a quad breed?
A quad breed. I don't know. I like it. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm not sure that's like a terminology that we use, although my specialty isn't in like hybridization. That's the terminology that we use in science. So when you've got one species of fish, for example, for fish, and a different species of fish, and you cross them, you get hybrids. I have caught hybrids when I was telling you about the work that I was doing on the boat with boat electrofishing. we did catch some hybrids. So there are some different species that can hybridize, and so you get what you call kind of like a crossbreed. Could you get like a hybrid and then another hybrid and then sort of get this kind of like super hybrid? Yeah, that's possible. It's just hard because usually different species stay different because they don't hybridize, or they don't, like, they actually can't reproduce or make sort of more fish. So that's why they're different species. So it's less likely that if you get like a hybrid and another hybrid and then you try to cross them, that they'll actually successfully make new fish.
But I love where your head's at. We are looking for like a koi wolf growler bear here, like a quad breed super predator.
Yeah.
Way to go, man. Ms. O'Connor's class, I guess this is Peyton coming to ask a question. Come on in and go for it.
Hey.
What is the most poisonous fish in the world?
Oh, the most poisonous fish in the world. So I could tell you from like my experiences, one of the reasons that I work on freshwater or worked on freshwater is because it was pretty safe. So there wasn't really anything that could bite you. Maybe a big snapping turtle, but I didn't have to worry about like crocodiles, or at least in Ontario, or sharks, or any like poisonous fish. So if you were looking for poisonous fish, you would probably have to look somewhere maybe in the Caribbean, somewhere where there's probably like a lot of predation, and you want to make yourself pretty not tasty and dangerous to predators that might want to eat you. So I would have to look up what probably is the most poisonous fish. It might actually be a cephalopod, like an octopus, who's not a fish. That might be something that is even more poisonous. But
I like the superlative questions, though. There's some out there, so I encourage you guys to check that out. Before we wrap up with some ways that you guys can actually get out all day long and become your scientists, I love this question from Ms. Gasco. JC in her class wants to know, why do scientific papers cost money to read them? Touches upon your open access point, Monica.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Fundamentally, we're not really sure why that's the case. It's just the way that the system has been built. So publishers that actually are the ones who are charging money for publications do need to recoup some of the costs that they have incurred or taken on when they're posting your paper. So much like, a magazine, you would have to pay to read a magazine. It's because, they have costs associated with like printing it and with doing maybe some editing. So there is some costs that have to be recouped by publishers. But we're sort of looking for different avenues for like, how can we make it so that it's not the public or the scientists that are paying the cost to put that paper somewhere where everyone can read it. So it just costs money to do things. And the solution potentially is to look for ways that we can take the cost away from public and scientists, and perhaps having other venues to get those costs back to these publishers that don't involve you paying money.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an issue that I think a lot of our older classrooms certainly will be interested in. Teachers might be keen on this, and around the world, scientists, this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue around the globe for government scientists, for public scientists, universities, and more. So open access is the name of this sort of debate and discussion, and I'd encourage our groups to check it out if they're keen. Monica, this has been so much fun. I want to highlight a few quick things before we wrap up together, because this has been so much fun. I think we've inspired a lot of future scientists now. So if you guys are keen as a classroom, if you guys want to get out and do something and take action, a few quick notes. Environment and Climate Change Canada has the amazing Climate Kids program. There's so many resources there on how you can take action to help protect the climate, learn more about some of the things that are happening. So do check that out. And then all May long, as Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, in partnership with Environment and Climate Change Canada, Parks Canada, other amazing groups around the globe, we are doing the Backyard Bio Project. So today we have classes in Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Missouri, Nova Scotia, Scotia, Ontario, and more. If you guys would want the chance to go explore and pick up those rocks, look through grass blade, listen for birds, see what you discover, and then connect with one another around the world to showcase what you found, Backyard Bio is a really, really cool tool. We've got 200 classes registered from 7 countries already. Lots of ways to learn more at backyardbio.net, share on social media, and through the iNaturalist and Seek app. So if you want to find out all the species that live near you, wherever you are around the world, iNaturalist.org, the Seek app, they're amazing tools. I hope you guys get the chance to use them, and we've done some info sessions on them over the last few weeks. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to have you back, and what a really cool story. And the feedback's been tremendous. We had classes that are going to be emailing me to get you more questions, but there's more questions than we could possibly ask in 40 minutes.
That sounds great.
Which is awesome. I mean, that's the best problem to have. So I love the enthusiasm today, everyone. And is there any last message you'd like to share before we wrap up the broadcast in a second?
Jeff, thank you so much again for having me here. Keep exploring, keep looking under rocks, and tell people what you find so that we can make science and knowledge more available to everybody.
Can't think of a better ending than that. I'm going to unmute all our classes today. So Miss Boyd, Miss Crouch, Miss Reyes, Miss Gagne, and Miss O'Connor, if you want to join me in saying
guys.
thank you very much, guys.